In early 2020, the COVID-19 pandemic struck the world and continues to have a severe impact on our lives here in South Africa. In 2021, a year into the global pandemic, we locate ourselves in Johannesburg at the GALA Queer Archive and Library to take a moment to reflect on the various challenges we continue to face as a community and as an organization. As a queer archive, we focus on preserving and recording LGBTIQ stories and histories to address the historical and current erasure of queer experiences and identities in society. Due to the pandemic, we found ourselves in a position that required us to have a shift in focus in order to respond to the immediate needs experienced by LGBTIQ people that no longer had access to food or basic needs. While all people were affected by the pandemic and lockdown measures, we realized that those in already marginalized social positions faced even greater difficulties. After implementing some relief initiatives, we quickly learned about the countless challenges and complexities involved in relief work, and therefore decided to reflect and to think critically about the need for relief in LGBTIQ communities during the pandemic and beyond. In collaboration with the Wits Centre for Diversity Studies, we undertook a project called Relief on the Edge, which was aimed at providing a space of reflection for queer community activists and civil society organizations. As part of this project, we convened discussions between queer activists who found themselves in the position of providing relief to LGBTIQ people in need before and during the pandemic. This discussion, facilitated by Anzio Jacobs, queer activist and director of an NGO called Scope, includes Jade Madingwane and Nosipho Vidima, activists from organizations and coalitions serving the needs of marginalized communities in the country. The purpose of this conversation was to reflect on what it means to provide relief to Black, LBQ, and sex worker communities in South Africa, and what can be done to strengthen this work moving forward.
My name is Nosipho Vidima. I come from the sex worker sector, and I say that because I'm part of many organizations who do the same work, service delivery for sex workers or human rights work for sex workers, or just advocating for decriminalization of sex work. And those are a CGK coalition. I sit in the steering committee there as Sonke Gender Justice though. I am a member of Sisonke, while also the steering committee member, and have worked at SWEET.
Thank you so much.
Hello, I'm Jade from Forum for the Empowerment of Women, a Black lesbian feminist organization. We are remote now, but we were based in Braamfontein for many years. So the work that we do, we empower the Black lesbian in different townships. For queer people, you go into a police station and report a case, for example, of rape, and you are queer. There are a lot of questions. There's secondary victimization in that space, you know. And the work that we do, that we always try to do, is have sensitization trainings within the police stations. We also try to work around dialogues within the communities. There are people that do understand and there are people that don't understand, you know. So for us, relief work looks like making sure that we try and make people understand as much as possible, you know, because we exist in these communities. There's no way that we're going to get out of these communities. So we don't have social spaces in communities that are queer friendly. So we see people going into a tavern, for example, to try and have a good time, and then obviously taverns are predominantly male, you know, and if people that do not understand two women in a relationship or two men in a relationship, it becomes a problem. You know, we've had so many cases of Black lesbians dying within the taverns or outside of the tavern because people did not necessarily understand, but they're hating the fact that two women are in a relationship.
Sanibonani. Igama lami ngu-Azania Sengwayo. I am a Black radical Pan-Africanist lesbian. I am from Val, VAL LGBTI to be more specific. We are currently dealing with, I think, 3 cases. Our most recent case is of Fifi Nodimagato. They were attacked at a tavern on a Sunday because of their sexuality.
Relief in our context really looks like funding not limited to a specific project, but also funding that looks like emergency funding, for example, because we never know when these hate crimes happen, you know. So there needs to be that emergency funding provided to organizations, particularly grassroots organizations that are doing all this work.
VAL LGBTI is not funded. We're a team of 5 people. We are not funded. Our office is here in our bags. We go every day in these streets and fight for our visibility. Fight so that we don't get erased, because we are being erased each and every day.
I think when we're talking for sex workers, the first point is relief in the form of access to justice is the biggest for sex workers. And this is done by the fact that sex workers or sex work remains criminalized in South Africa, in this country. And sex workers just don't have access to justice. They cannot go to a police station and report crimes against them. They cannot go to institutions that are supposed to uphold human rights to report human rights violations, because they'd have to actually criminalize themselves first and say that I'm a sex worker, and then they outed, they discriminated upon, stigma comes in, and most of the times because of those blockages, what they came for is never given to them.
Hi everyone, we at the Funked Walked march today made specifically for decriminalization of sex work. Sex workers' rights are violated every day. Sex workers are dying. Sex workers that are queer are dying every other day. It's time for legislation to change. They need to move away from a criminalized system because it's violent itself, and give us decriminalization of sex work.
What we slowly starting to see also is that we barely have relief in the form of psychosocial support. It is traumatic work because, again, of the criminalization. The fact that you can get raped and you can't go to a police station, you can't really go to an institution that's known to give psychosocial support because they don't understand sex workers' environments, kind of makes sex workers isolated and have to deal with them, with their issues and their traumas on their own.
The Constitution, yes, Bala Nat. Yes. Not to South Africans, not just lapo as sex workers. As wafuna ma manifesto, sifuna idikrimanje.
Have you found that COVID-19 has changed the forms of relief needed by the community that you serve?
It most certainly did. Where normally we know that sex workers can afford a lot in their lives because sex workers work and it is a form of income, where sex workers can be able to send money to back home. Sex workers are able to pay school fees. Sex workers are able to pay for their rent. They're able to feed themselves. They're able to pay for medications if medications are needed. We found that during the pandemic, we had to find ways to kind of pay for these things because they could not go to work. Number one, and they had no door to actually go and knock to for relief. Some of them were even undocumented people. And the government had given out this 350 to everybody else, but because they're undocumented, they're not from this country, or due to their backgrounds, they never really got an ID book, for instance. So we found that it was really hard, but it shifted in that we had to now give people that had normally been able to sustain themselves, afford their lives, even make their lives better, now needed the basics of the basic: money for bread, money for sanitary pads, money to buy porridge for the kids, money to buy nappies for babies. And at some point, when we started seeing this issue, we asked the community through a Back Buddy fund page to help us to actually meet these needs, because previously it's not needs that we actually needed to give to our community. So the money that we had, although the funders were nice, some of them were flexible and were able to say redirect the money, but it was still sort of like ring-fenced to food parcels only, and not necessarily nappies, not necessarily my kids that are as Lalini with my grandmother needing to actually also get maybe medical bills or medical things paid. So it did change. It did.
So we also had to give out food parcels, and the first month we did a drive. We drove to these locations where people stayed at to hand out food parcels, but that did not work in our favor so well, because we were targeted, by community members thinking, I don't know, I think they thought we were like government handing out food parcels. So our safety was at risk, because at some point in Green Village there was a group of men looking at our truck and saying that they're going to get food for their families, and understandably so. At that time people were hungry, people were not working, so it was very difficult for us at that time. And then we resorted to food vouchers for people. It worked easier, but again, there was another problem with that, because people needed to go to a ShopRite or a Checker. So that meant they need to ukibeli taxi to go and access that, So there's always challenges in whatever you try and do. We thought this was a solution, but then it came with another problem,
We understand then that food parcels and vouchers have limitations on them. So are we fully addressing the needs that are associated with relief?
I don't think so, because the initial food packs had a lot of things, right? It had your vegetables, it had sanitary towels, it had the staples, and so the food voucher was also now very limited, because I realized that the package, the initial groceries that we were sending out, I think costed close to 1,000 rand, and then the food voucher we had to cap it to 500 rand so that we feed more people. So obviously, 500 rand uzothenga impuphu, uzothenga rice, uzothenga beans, and whereas the packages that we had done initially, there was all of those staples, or soup, nama vegetable. So it then meant for the 500 rand one, they probably didn't get vegetables. They only got the staples, Also, in terms of transport money to get to a ShopRite, instead of us going to them, it was a risk for us going there because of our safety as an organization, but also because of COVID. As much as we took precaution, but there were some people that were not wearing masks, and when we were asking people to wear masks, it was like, it's nothing. COVID is so weird, So people were not understanding that this is a real issue, We also now had to move to digital, and digital is really not my thing. I really love interacting with people, so it meant that community dialogues, for example, we did not do last year. We did not interact with, for example, the community, older people that do not have smartphones, that only have utilili. It was very difficult. With the hard lockdown, it meant people stay in homophobic families, and it meant that they don't exercise their queer identities within those families, In terms of psychosocial support, if you don't have WhatsApp to talk to a counselor from Lifeline, it meant that you are sitting at home with homophobic parents and are feeling depressed and cannot do anything about it, cannot talk to anyone but exist in that household.
I'm gonna praise the resilience of communities sometimes, because at some point when we started realizing that there had been people that we hadn't been able to communicate to, because they couldn't join the Zoom meetings, they couldn't join the WhatsApp groups that had been created. Some of our community members actually were like, let's go into cells, guys. Find one person who has a smartphone, who's going to join the WhatsApp group, and then be able to actually disseminate the information that is coming from the group to everybody else, maybe 10 people. And I just want to praise that resilience that came out of the sex worker community, because they were able to do that. And then we were actually able to get in touch with people again. And I think it became apparent that we hadn't talked to those people, because the register that we used for community dialogues in each area showed us, when we actually handed out the food vouchers, that we did not see somebody like this. So where are they? So we started asking around. It was also very fearful, because we thought some people had passed away. With the end, and we had to look for them. But I'm just really appreciative of the resilience that we find in our communities, whether it's our queer siblings, whether it's sex workers themselves.
Have there been challenges that you've experienced when you're implementing this work? So Jade, you talk about kind of people refusing to wear masks around you, but more broadly, what have the challenges been around implementation of relief?
I think the biggest challenge for us was not being able to do sensitization trainings, right, in these communities, because for our advocacy for us looks like going into these communities and talking about sexual orientation, gender identity, and expression, so that people understand and people know that queer people exist in these communities that we live in. In lockdown, it meant that we could not physically monitor hate crimes cases, and that was a huge challenge, because it means that, one, we're not giving support to the victim and the victim's families,
So I'm very sad. I'm angry. I'm scared. Because I don't think we're able to exist freely. The past few months have been so heavy, and the work that we do, monitoring hate crimes cases, it's really not easy. And the past couple of months has proven that the Constitution and its policies, its human rights policies, are beautiful on paper, but when it comes to our lived realities, it really does not work for us.
We need more government sensitized responses, and that would be a form of relief for us, because like you were saying, that we could not sensitize people. So maybe what we should be having is a government that is able to sensitize its own personnel and its own structures and its own relief and response.
How to smell us, Little smell magate Baba mandanga no boy Lisa bobako no boy bobako Nati mdali singa bako Nati mdali singa bako